Hi everybody, it's Jennifer. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about watercoloring, specifically using Zig alcohol markers and gelatos. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, I got this background stamp by Simon Says Stamp, Gerber Daisy's background. And I wanted to, I wanted to do a background a while ago using watercolors. I love to try new things, and I hope you do too. So I have a couple of ideas I wanted to try out. One was using gelatos. I had gotten these at Michael's. I had a coupon for 50% off, so I had gotten them for I think $13, and I wanted to try using water with them. And then I had my Zig Clean Color markers. I hadn't really used them, and so I wanted to try using some water with them too. They're alcohol markers. So if you don't have the Zig markers, you may have other alcohol markers that will work. So the gelatos, I thought they're pretty cool. I hadn't tried them before. So they're, I was thinking they were kind of like crayons maybe, but actually they're really soft. They're not really so waxy, but they kind of feel a little like crayons, but they're really soft and they work well with water. I haven't used them for anything else, so I don't know what else they're good with, but I'll let you know when I find out. I use some Versamark. I'm going to emboss some of the cards, and others I'm just going to use Hero Arts, the black ink. And then I have this I love the Nuvo Drops, so I'm going to use that, the center of the daisies, on one of the cards, so you'll see that soon. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to use my Tim Holtz glass media matte. I like the fact that I can attach the stamp directly to it because it's a cling stamp. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in here in a second, but what I'm going to do is use this opportunity to just stamp or ink up the stamp and then use the paper and just lay it right over the stamp versus trying to put it in a misty and mess around with it. I find this technique just easier to use. So I'm using my Hero Art stamp here. You're going to see me lay the card, and it's important if you use this technique that you just put the paper down, don't move it around, and then I use just a regular piece of copy paper and lay it over top and use this to press the ink into the paper. And this works really well. And then when you're done, just go ahead and lift it up and you will find the perfect stamp every time. It does an awesome job. So there it is, pretty simple. So I mentioned I was going to do some cards with just ink and other cards I was going to emboss. And so for this next one, I am going to use Versamark and I'm going to emboss it. And I know right now you're saying to yourself, but Jennifer, the stamp still looks like it has black ink on it. And I thought to myself, nope, I cleaned that off. And this stamp had so much detail in it. You will soon see that, well, I thought it was cleaned off and no more was coming off on my towel. That isn't exactly true, but from all mistakes sometimes comes blessings. And what I found was, and you'll see this in a moment, after I emboss it, and you'll see it actually before I emboss it, you'll see when I press it into here, that there's this cool color that comes out like almost a gray or a light pearl color once I emboss it. And there was still black ink. It's always good, I think, when you have these detailed stamps to actually, use a scrub or something like that to get it all off. So you can see it there. It was not all clean, but it worked out. Actually, I like this. When I see the finished cards, I actually like that there was a little bit of detail. It makes it easier for me. As you get older, sometimes seeing is a little bit hard, and when I'm watercoloring, I like to have a little bit of line. So it worked out for me. But If you don't want lines, it is going to be very important if you're using a stamp that it gets clean. If you want to emboss first before you put the black ink on it, you can do that too. That may make more sense. It's just not what I did. So I am embossing here, putting embossing powder down on this. And the next one, I actually wind up cleaning off that black ink because you can still see that it's there. I go get some solution and clean it off. So you could clean it off a couple of different ways. Water did not work because that is what I used. So you need to either get a little bit of soap or warm water, soak it, or some of that stays on ink remover. Or if you have a scrubber, go ahead and use that. So here are the three different versions that I did. So the one on the left is one I did off camera. It is a clear crystal, so it had none of the black ink. And the one in the middle is the one that I thought was clear, but had still some of the residue of the black ink, and it turned out that great color. The one on the far right was just ink, no embossing. And what I wind up using, I didn't mention this earlier on, is a cardstock that I like to use. It's Bristol Smooth cardstock. And the one I buy is a 9 by 12 inch, so I wind up cutting it down. And what I like about it is it really holds up to when you use some water. Now listen, it's not watercolor or water, cardstock. But what I like about it is it's smooth. And so it stamps well. And one of the things I recommend is, if you haven't done this already, is you try to swatch all of your markers on cardstock that you're going to use. And that's what I'm showing here. Sometimes you think you may go with one color, but when you swatch it, you're like, I didn't know it was going to look like that on that cardstock. And different cardstocks perform differently with different markers or different paints, different watercolors. So try them out. And I'll give you an example at the bottom. I was really struggling with not just the colors of the flowers, but the greens. There was a lot of different greens in this set. I think there was only 30 some colors in the set, but it gave you a plethora of greens. And so the ones I thought I was going to go with, I wound up choosing different ones in the end that worked for me than what I thought I initially was going to go with. So I would just recommend, doing that. Once you do it, you have it forever. I wound up doing the same thing with the gelatos. So I wind up swatching without using the water and then what it looks like with the water. So just another recommendation I have here, I have like a practice sheet that I used. If you haven't worked with things before, I would recommend having something that you can play with that you don't care if you mess up with. I was doing some test runs on, okay, what did colors look like? How much water should I put? How much marker should I put? How much leeway do I have using the gelato versus the alcohol markers? So just something to think about. It was just kind of a practice sheet for me, which was a cool way of trying to figure things out. And could I get some shadow or highlighting? And it was a bit difficult with water. I think it's easier to get some highlighting, at least for me, and maybe because I'm new at it. Using the water, it was a little bit harder for me to get that highlighting. I even tried to go back. You see that flower in the middle. I put the watercolor down and then I went back in and added some marker over it once it dried, and so that's why you see a little bit more of it in the middle that's a little bit darker. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's too much. So and it kind of took away from that watercolor look I was going for. But try different things. Do practice run on a separate piece of paper, and that way your final project's really more in line with what you're looking for. I'm going to speed up through a lot of this coloring. I think you'll get the general idea. I'm going to tell you what I do on the first card, and this is the one that just has ink. It doesn't have the embossing. What I wind up doing is just putting little bits of ink towards the center of the flower. I use water that I dip the brush into, not a whole lot of it, and I push out the ink. This card of all of them is the brightest card. And so if you're looking for something with a lot more color, I think that this ink affords that to you because it's directly going onto the paper. There's no embossing, and so it's very bright. And I use that pretty much with all of it. The only thing that I think that I saw happening here, because the colors were all kind of in that red or orange family, that it was too much. I had to reevaluate and balance it out with a little bit more of the yellow orange. And so you'll see me add that in about halfway through, and then I carry that through the other cards too. If you haven't done this before, something to keep in mind, I do use the paintbrush in this one. In the other cards, I'll use like an auto feed water brush. You know, it's your preference of which one you like. I think that they both worked well. And I'd say, I think the biggest thing is the first card took me the longest, and then once you got in the groove of it, it moved pretty quickly. So you'll see I kind of like pick up and get going, and it becomes easier and easier. I will say painting within on the card seemed to take a little bit longer versus you'll see in the upcoming cards using the water and putting the color down outside of the card seemed to go much quicker. So when pulling this card together, I really wanted to highlight the warmthness of it. And so I put it on some red cardstock that I had, and I had some alcohol ink that I had used on a previous project. I thought would be great for the sediment that I embossed on. I added some gold sequins, and the other color, I don't know if you can tell, but it's like a light purple and almost looks silver. And then I added some gold Nuvo drops to the center of the flowers just to kind of bring, again, out the warmth of it. So let's move on to card number 2. So for this card, it's one of the embossed ones, and it was the one that had a little bit of ink still on there, so it has that silver pearlized look. With this, I have put the Zig markers down on my glass mat, and that's what I think is cool about this mat, right? And I'm adding water to the card and to the mat, and so I can kind of dip into it, put some water on the card, and then add the markers in. You'll see me doing some kind of blending on the mat, which I think is one of the benefits versus the first card that I did. You can mix colors over on the mat and then add them to the card. I think it's also just worth mentioning again, you want to be careful about how much water you're adding to your card. You don't want to add too much. If you do, that's okay. Just go ahead and dab some off. Better to use a paper towel. I don't know why I didn't go get a paper towel, but I kept using my little cloth there and dabbing it off, and it's fine. It worked. But, you know, you want to put enough water so when you lay down the ink, it kind of moves. And that's, again, I'd mentioned it went pretty fast on these cards because it really did. It went really fast. Now, you do see, to me, a lighter ink. It looks more like watercoloring. I did not go back and add more ink, but you could. You could certainly let this dry and come back and add another layer. I did not do that. And when it does dry, it dries even a little bit lighter. Listen, I am not Monet. So Monet probably would have come back several times, added more colors, added highlights. I did not do this. I just wanted to experiment. This was kind of my first go of it. You'll see me playing with a different paintbrush in here. This is that water-fed paintbrush, and I actually wind up switching over to it versus going back and forth with the regular one and adding water. So it just wound up working a little bit easier for me on this card. I actually like the silver in the background. It made it easier for me to see what I was coloring. Sometimes it was really hard to see when it's just the clear version of it, but it's completely up to you. You'll see in the next card I do, it is just the clear, so it looks like you're coloring with no lines. Hey, did you notice that the light actually got turned on in the video? So if you noticed it got brighter, I forgot I was filming without the light on. So I apologize. Could be another reason why I couldn't see what I was coloring very well. But in this card, I mentioned previously that I wanted to ensure that I had enough balance of color in my card, which I encourage you to do too. I had way too much pink and red going on in the last one. So when I started coloring this one, I made sure to really plot out where I was going to put the yellows. And that can be hard when you've got a lot of repeat patterns. I don't know if you guys have had that. If you have a way that you use to really balance that out, comment down below. I think that's really interesting. You know, you've got to be thoughtful and mindful about, I think, how you do that. So I've moved on to the next card. This is the one where you can't see the lines. It's just clear embossing. And again, just using the same colors. The only difference is it's just clear. I'm still using the paintbrush that feeds the water. I do start blending some colors. You'll see, you know, you start to go, okay, there's a lot of flowers here and we don't all want the same color. Nature doesn't exactly work like that anyway. So, you know, just start blending your colors and quickly, you know, get through this card. You can see it goes very fast compared to the first one. So I love that. So let's look at the final versions of these cards. I really wanted the cards to stand out with the flowers. That was really the main focus. So I chose two sediments. The first one on the top was Friend, really a thin die cut. I put this one on a silver cardstock, just border around the edge to just kind of highlight the flower, the embossing powder, and then put it on a green card to bring out the leaves the flowers were with. And in the center of the flowers, just a very light colored Nuvo drop and a couple of sequins around it. So again, very simple, very much focused on the flowers. The second one, I wanted to highlight more the center of the flowers. Again, Nuvo drops, but they were a little bit brighter, this purple color. A sediment, again, very thin, hello, and a couple of Nuvo drops spread around the card. It's on a white card, and that was it. Very simple. So this last version, I am using Gelatos by Faber-Castell, and I thought it'd be cool. I found these at Michael's and they were $13 after a 50% off coupon. And I'm going to use them in a very similar fashion to what I've been doing with the alcohol markers. So you see I got them lined up, I chose my colors, I did swatches with them, and I'm using water. I find I have to use a little bit more water. I would not apply these directly necessarily onto the cards, although I did try it because you know I had to. But I am going in and they appear pretty intense on the card and they do very much lighten up like watercolors. So and some of them were a little too light, so I had to go back in, and you see me doing that there, where I go back in and I add some more colors over the top of them. They do dry very quickly, and you need a little bit more water because as you see that they're on the glass mat, they tend to dry out. They have the consistency of like a crayon in the tube when you put it down, but they're not waxy like a crayon. So I'd say they're creamy. They're definitely a creamy texture, but they just glide right onto the paper. It was super easy to use them. I decided to add some blue in here just to kind of add a cool color. I've been using so many warm colors, and I thought, I know, you know, nature doesn't produce blue flowers like this in this flower family, but I'm going to say it does, and so I added it in. So I thought it was cool to try them. I definitely want to see what other things I can do with these gelatos, and I have the version of Brights. I actually picked up another set of them. I think there's like at least 3 different sets of colors of these gelatos, and I like that we can just go down the street and pick them up for a really reasonable price. So I kept just adding to them, and again, like watercolors, you can mix them up. Here's the final version of that card. I don't think this photo does it justice. I really like the in-person version. I added some Swarovski crystals, so that's what you see there. There are these light blue, pretty crystals on the card. I added a very small sediment to the center of it. Like the other cards, I really wanted the flowers to stand out and be this showpiece, the showcase of the card. And that's it. Thanks so much for joining. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you want to see other videos like this, go ahead and hit subscribe. Have a great day or evening, depending on when you're watching this. Thanks so much.